The evening air is thick with mist as black-tinted cars snake up the winding road leading to Harrowfield Manor, an opulent estate hidden deep within the English countryside. The grand, ivy-clad mansion looms over the guests as they step out, their breaths visible in the crisp night air. A butler in a perfectly pressed uniform stands at the entrance, his expression unreadable, as he ushers them inside. Inside, the manor is a world of its own. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the marble floors. Oil paintings of long-forgotten aristocrats stare down from the walls, and the air carries the faint scent of aged whiskey and old parchment. A grand staircase spirals toward the upper floors, disappearing into shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimes, its deep toll resonating through the hall's an ominous welcome. Each guest, impeccably dressed, arrives with their own silent apprehensions. This is no ordinary gathering. At precisely 8 p.m., the doors to the grand dining hall swing open, revealing Victor Langley, a man of power, wealth, and an air of controlled arrogance. He stands at the head of a long mahogany table, dressed in a dark velvet suit, a single ruby ring gleaming under the candlelight. His piercing blue eyes scan the room, reading each guest like a book. Victor is an art collector, yes, but also something more. He has a reputation for knowing things he shouldn't, secrets that are meant to stay buried. Some whisper that he dabbles in blackmail. Others claim he simply enjoys playing God. Tonight, however, he is here for one reason only. With a slow, deliberate breath, he raises his crystal glass. The room stills. The guests exchange glances, some intrigued, some wary. Victor's voice is smooth but carries the weight of something dangerous. I want to thank you all for accepting my invitation. It isn't every day that one gets to be part of something extraordinary. He pauses, a slight smirk playing at his lips as he takes a sip of his wine, letting the tension build. The guests lean in, waiting. Then, with chilling finality, he drops the bombshell. One among you is not who they claim to be. By the end of this weekend, the truth will be unveiled. A beat of silence. Then chaos. A sharp intake of breath from the widow Vivian Harcourt. A nervous chuckle from Julian Marks. Eleanor Graves, the young novelist, narrows her eyes. Doctor. Samuel Vance grips his cane a little tighter. Inspector Reed remains perfectly still, observing the room like a hunter watching prey. Someone is an imposter, but who? And why would Victor bring them here only to expose them? Victor doesn't elaborate. Instead, he takes his seat at the head of the table and gestures for dinner to be served, as if he hasn't just set a trap that will leave them all tangled in its web. The guests, unsettled, steal glances at one another. Every conversation becomes an interrogation. Every movement is analyzed. Someone here is lying, but who? Outside, the wind howls against the stained glass windows. A storm is coming. And by the end of this weekend, not everyone will leave Harrowfield Manor alive. The guests arrive, a house full of secrets. As the golden chandeliers flicker above the grand dining hall, the 6 guests settle into their seats. But beneath the surface, unease coils like a snake, silent and waiting. Each person sitting at this table has their own story, a story they'd rather keep buried. 1. Eleanor Graves, the observer. A young novelist in her late 20s, Eleanor has made a name for herself by writing psychological thrillers. But tonight, she isn't here to write. She's here because of something Victor knows about her past. Something she has never spoken about. Her sharp brown eyes dart around the table, mentally cataloging every expression, every nervous twitch. She doesn't trust any of them. And why should she? Someone here is a liar. 2. Dr. Samuel Vance, the man with a shadowed past. A retired physician in his late 50s, Dr. Vance carries himself with the weary grace of a man who has seen too much. His hands, once steady enough to perform life-saving surgeries, now tremble slightly when he reaches for his glass. There is a rumor about him, a patient who died under strange circumstances, a case that was never fully closed. If Victor knows something, could this night be the end of the good doctor's silence? 3. Julian Marks, the gambler who never loses. Charming, smooth, and dangerously unreadable, Julian Marks leans back in his chair, playing with a silver coin between his fingers. He has spent his life reading people, predicting their tells, uncovering their weaknesses. But tonight, he can't shake the feeling that the game has already begun, and for the first time, he might be the one being played. 4. Vivian Harcourt, the widow in black. Dressed in elegant mourning attire, Vivian Harcourt sips her wine with calculated ease. Her late husband died under peculiar circumstances, and the inheritance that followed was more than generous. She has seen scandal before, but Victor's words, "one among you is not who they claim to be," make her blood run cold. Could he know what she's done? 5. Inspector Reed, the watchful eye. Reed, a man in his early 40s, watches the room with unnerving stillness. He was invited here as an observer, but why? Is he here as a guest or as an investigator? If so, what case is he working on? And more importantly, is his presence a coincidence or part of Victor's game? 6. The mysterious stranger, the uninvited guest. A presence that unsettles them all. No one seems to know who this person is. They weren't formally invited, yet here they sit, their lips curled into the faintest smirk. When someone finally asks their name, the stranger simply chuckles and replies, "Does it matter? We're all strangers in the dark, aren't we?" The night takes a deadly turn. As the evening wears on, tension simmers beneath the surface. Secrets press against locked doors. The storm outside grows violent, wind thrashing against the high windows of Harrowfield Manor. And then, just past midnight, the power flickers. A scream echoes through the halls. The guests rush toward the sound, their footsteps thundering down the corridors. It leads them to Victor Langley's study. The heavy oak door is locked. They pound against it, no answer. Julian shoves against the wood, and after a few tries, it finally bursts open. What they see makes the blood in their veins turn to ice. He is slumped over his mahogany desk, a single candle still flickering beside him. His eyes are frozen in terror, mouth slightly parted, as if he tried to say something before death took him. The air reeks of cigar smoke and something metallic blood. And there, resting on his chest, is a single playing card. Someone gasps. Eleanor steps forward, her breath shaky. "A message," she whispers. But from who? Cliffhanger. Just as they begin to process the horror before them, the door, which was locked from the inside, slams shut behind them. The candles flicker violently. And then, a low chuckle fills the room. But Victor is dead. So who just laughed? The death of Victor Langley has cast an eerie shadow over Harrowfield Manor, and the guests who once arrived with curiosity now find themselves trapped in a web of suspicion and fear. The storm rages outside, but the tension inside the grand estate is palpable. No one speaks much, their eyes avoiding one another as they move quietly through the corridors. The manor, which once seemed like a luxurious haven, now feels like a prison, each room an echo of secrets, and each hallway filled with the ghost of Victor's last words. "One among you is not who they claim to be." Inspector Reed stands at the head of the group in the grand drawing room, his figure tall and commanding. His sharp, calculating gaze scans the group, his presence an anchor of calm amidst the chaos. Reed has seen death before, but this felt different. There was something deliberate in Victor's murder, a message embedded within the crime. The guests stand in a loose circle, visibly uncomfortable, yet trying to maintain an air of composure. The clock on the wall ticks loudly, marking the passage of time as it drags on, every second heavier than the last. The room smells of polished wood, candle wax, and the faint musk of old books, a strange, unsettling fragrance in the wake of death. Reed clears his throat, drawing the guests' attention. "I'm sure you all understand why we're here. Victor Langley is dead, and I need answers. The investigation has begun, and I will ask each of you a few questions. Please be as forthcoming as possible. You never know who's listening." His eyes sweep over them, each person shrinking under his gaze, as if they've been caught in a trap. One by one, Reed calls them in for questioning. The silence in the room grows louder with each passing minute. Every movement feels like an accusation, every breath heavy with the unspoken weight of truth that everyone is trying to avoid. Eleanor Graves, the novelist with a dark past. The first to be called into Reed's study is Eleanor Graves, the young novelist whose sharp eyes have always been her greatest asset. Eleanor had been relatively quiet since the murder, speaking only when spoken to, but tonight her hands are trembling. She's wearing a cream-colored dress that clings slightly to her slender figure, her face pale but determined. As she enters the study, Reed closes the door behind her. "I understand you knew Victor Langley, Miss Graves," Reed begins, his voice cool and methodical. "Perhaps more than you've let on. I need you to tell me everything. What was your relationship with him?" Eleanor stiffens but quickly masks it with a smile. "Victor was a mentor. I had come to him for advice, guidance. He was a patron of my work, you could say." Her voice is steady, but there's something in her eyes, an unreadable flicker, a wariness that Reed picks up on immediately. "A patron?" Reed presses, his gaze unwavering. "Is that all?" Eleanor shifts uncomfortably in her seat. Her mind races, memories of their late-night conversations flooding her thoughts. Victor had been more than just a patron. He had known her darkest secrets, the ones she had buried beneath layers of fiction, secrets she had woven into her novels, disguised so cleverly that only someone with his insight could see through them. "Why are you so nervous, Miss Graves?" Reed asks, his voice sharp. "It seems to me you're hiding something." Eleanor's breath hitches. She can feel her throat closing up, but she swallows hard and meets his gaze. "Victor," she begins, her voice faltering. "Victor was one of the few who understood my work. I respected him deeply. But that's all. There's nothing more to tell." Reed studies her for a long moment. He doesn't believe her. He can feel the tension in the room thicken. There's something she's not saying, but she's too clever to reveal it easily. He lets the silence stretch, hoping she'll crack. But Eleanor remains composed. "Very well." Reed says finally, "We'll come back to that." Dr. Samuel Vance, the retired physician with a troubling past. Next, Dr. Samuel Vance is summoned. The retired physician is an older man, his once strong frame now slightly hunched, his hands trembling with the weight of the years he spent healing others. He walks into the room with a quiet dignity, though the heaviness of his past is written all over his face. He knows this interrogation will be more than just routine. It will be a reckoning. "You were the one who prescribed Victor Langley medication," Reed begins, his tone direct. "Tell me about that." Dr. Vance's eyes flicker momentarily. He adjusts his glasses and clears his throat. "Victor, he had a condition, severe insomnia. I prescribed him a sleeping tonic to help him rest." His voice is calm, but there's an underlying tension in his words. Reed leans forward, his eyes narrowing. "A sleeping tonic, you say? Tell me, Dr. Vance, what was in that tonic?" Vance's hand clenches into a fist for a brief moment. It was a harmless mixture. Valerian root, lavender, nothing that would cause harm, he says, his voice growing firmer. But there's something in his eyes that betrays him, a flicker of guilt, an underlying fear. "Are you sure?" Reed presses. "You see, I've looked into Victor's medical history, Dr. Vance. He was never diagnosed with insomnia. His symptoms, migraines, fatigue, didn't add up. And what's more, we found traces of an unknown substance in his blood. Something more toxic." Vance's face pales. He swallows, the sweat on his brow visible now. I didn't know," he stammers. "I thought I was helping him. I swear, I never meant any harm." Reed watches him carefully. "Then why did you prescribe something so unusual?" Vance trails off, his voice faltering. "Victor had been asking for something stronger. He was desperate." He looks away, avoiding Reed's gaze. "I didn't ask questions. I should have, but I didn't." Reed stands up slowly, his hands folded behind his back. "You're telling me you gave him something you didn't fully understand?" Vance remains silent. His body is rigid, and Reed senses that something is off. Was it possible that Victor was poisoned? The pieces are starting to fall into place, but it still doesn't explain everything. Julian Marks, the gambler with everything to lose. The next to be questioned is Julian Marks, the charming gambler whose smile could disarm anyone. He enters the study with an air of nonchalance, as if this were just another game, another bet he needed to win. He takes a seat with a relaxed posture, as if he's been here 1,000 times before. "I understand you owed Victor Langley quite a large sum of money." Reed starts, his voice cold. "How much was it?" Julian's smile falters for just a second before he leans forward, his voice smooth and easy. "I'm sure you understand, Inspector, that gambling debts can sometimes get out of hand. It wasn't a large sum, really. A few £1,000s, nothing more." He shrugs, his eyes glinting with a dangerous light. Reed's eyes never leave Julian's face. A few £1,000s. Funny. Because Victor seemed to think otherwise. He had written about the debt in his personal ledger. You'd been dodging him for months. Julian's fingers twitch. He shifts in his seat, but quickly regains his composure. "Victor and I had an arrangement, a deal, but I had every intention of paying him back." "You can't be serious, Inspector. I would never kill him over money." His eyes flicker nervously, betraying his calm demeanor. Reed leans in, his voice low and deliberate. "You wouldn't be the first man to kill for money, Mr. Marks, and you certainly wouldn't be the first man to lie about it." Julian's jaw tightens, his eyes narrowing. "I didn't kill him. I didn't have to. There were others who wanted him dead just as much as I did. Maybe even more." Reed sits back, folding his arms. "Who, Mr. Marks? Who are you talking about?" But Julian just smiles, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "You'll figure that out soon enough, Inspector. You always do, don't you?" Vivian's cryptic note and the stranger's true identity. Revelation and rising tension. As the interrogation unfolds, the atmosphere in Harrowfield Manor grows thicker, like a storm before the strike of lightning. The guests sit in an unspoken agreement, their nerves fraying at the edges as each new revelation deepens the mystery. But for Vivian Harcourt, the wealthy widow in black, the weight of her past begins to surface in a most unsettling way. The cryptic note she had received from Victor Langley the day before his death is the key to unlocking something far darker. She had kept it hidden, folded carefully in the pocket of her dress, away from prying eyes. But now, with the tension mounting and everyone under suspicion, she knows the time has come to reveal it. As Vivian slowly pulls the note from her pocket, the room falls silent. Her fingers tremble slightly, but she composes herself and holds it out to Reed. The note, written in Victor's elegant script, reads, "If you want to survive this weekend, find the truth before it finds you." Vivian's voice is barely a whisper as she speaks, her lips pale and trembling. Victor, he knew something. He was always so secretive, always watching us. She pauses, her hand clutching the note for support. This isn't just about debts or revenge. Something deeper is at play here. Inspector Reed's eyes flicker with intrigue. This note could be the break they needed, yet something doesn't sit right. It doesn't explain why Vivian was specifically warned. What could Victor have known about her that would place her in such direct danger? Reed can feel the pieces beginning to move beneath the surface, but they're not coming together fast enough. As the investigation proceeds, the mysterious stranger, the uninvited guest who had arrived without a name, without any introduction, remains a haunting presence. They had kept to the edges of the group, observing, never speaking unless spoken to. But now, Reed has questions that demand answers. Who is this stranger? And why did they appear here, at Harrowfield Manor, on the same night that Victor made his shocking revelation? Were they a mere coincidence, or was Victor's warning about them too? Reed calls the stranger into his study. The room grows colder as the door closes behind them. The stranger's face remains partially obscured by shadows, their voice low and cryptic. "I'm no one," they say, their tone barely a whisper. Just a shadow in a room full of lies. The tension between them thickens, like the air in a locked room. Reed presses harder, demanding answers, but the stranger's responses are evasive, their demeanor unsettling. Every word they speak feels rehearsed, calculated, designed to mislead. Yet, when Reed mentions Victor's warning, the stranger's eyes flicker for just a second, like a mask slipping. They know something, but what? And why won't they say? As the pieces of Victor's life begin to unravel hidden letters, coded messages, strange financial dealings, Reed begins to realize that the motive behind Victor's murder is not what anyone expects. It's not just a matter of greed or old scores. It's something far more intricate, woven into the very fabric of Victor's secret world. Each revelation is like peeling back a layer of an onion, only to find yet another mystery beneath it. But just as the investigation is about to break wide open, the manor is plunged into a new nightmare. Cliffhanger. The sound of a scream echoes through the manor, tearing through the silence like a dagger. The guests rush to the source of the cry, hearts racing, fear tightening their chests. What they find is enough to freeze their blood. In the library, one of the prime suspects, Dr. Samuel Vancelli, is motionless on the floor, his body twisted in a grotesque, unnatural position. The door to the library had been locked from the inside, but when they break it down, they find it too late. The method of his death mirrors that of Victor's. No signs of struggle, no clues, but a single ace of spades. Victor's signature card is resting upon his chest. It's a chilling message. The killer is still among them, and they're watching. The door slams shut behind them, the candlelight flickering wildly as the shadows dance on the walls. Someone in this room is not who they claim to be. The web of lies is tightening, and in the dark corners of Harrowfield Manor, a killer waits, ever closer. The truth is within reach, but time is running out. The grand deception, twists and reveal. The storm outside has turned into a violent crescendo, the wind howling against the stone walls of Harrowfield Manor, shaking the foundations as though nature itself wishes to tear the manor apart. The guests, already on edge after 2 brutal murders, are now trapped inside, the weight of the storm a mirror to the mounting pressure within. No one can leave. The roads are flooded, the trees downed. The world outside is a churning sea of darkness, but inside, the secrets are as thick as the fog. The night feels endless, a cage of whispers and unspoken fears. As the house holds its breath, Inspector Reed begins to question his role in all this. The truth feels like a moving target, ever slipping from his grasp. What if everything he believed was merely a part of a larger deception? What if the true game wasn't one he was merely solving, but one he was meant to play, one where his every move, his every question, has been anticipated long before the first body dropped? The more Reed uncovers, the more disorienting the situation becomes. Victor Langley, the dead man, was never the pawn in this puzzle. He had been the architect of the entire game. As Reed continues to lead the investigation, the guests are visibly fraying at the edges. Their desperation and guilt manifest in subtle ways, eyes avoiding each other, hands fidgeting nervously, forced smiles masking fear. Eleanor Graves, the young novelist, remains quiet, but her mind is working overtime, scanning every small detail for an answer. There is something lurking beneath her calm exterior, a memory that she keeps hidden, something about Victor she hasn't shared yet. Julian Marks, the charming gambler, keeps trying to turn the attention toward others, weaving his own half-truths into every conversation, but something doesn't add up. He is too quick with explanations, too eager to stay ahead of the questions. Vivian Harcourt, the wealthy widow, seems broken but more observant than anyone. Her cryptic note from Victor, a warning, begins to take on deeper significance as the storm rages outside. She knows she is a piece in this game you and Victor had marked long before the retreat began. Then, a discovery shakes them to their core. Eleanor, having spent the better part of the morning combing through Victor's study, finds an oddity. A bookshelf, strangely out of place, its wood cracked and aged as if time had ignored it, hides a doorway. It opens with a creak, a thick cloud of dust escaping as though the secrets of the manor had been sealed away for years. Beyond it lies a narrow passage, dark and suffocating, but its purpose is clear. This is no ordinary hallway. It is a hidden path, an underground tunnel leading to something far more significant. With the dim light from the candles in their hands, they proceed cautiously, their footsteps echoing like distant whispers, and finally reach a hidden chamber, Victor's secret vault. As they pry open the door, the dust-covered room reveals itself to be an unsettling treasure trove of secrets. Old contracts, financial ledgers, private letters addressed to powerful and dangerous individuals, and photographs, all scattered across a massive oak table. In the center lies a chest, its lock intricate and old, as though it has been untouched for decades. They sift through the papers, each one more damning than the last. There are deals that extend far beyond art dealings. Victor had been involved in underground operations, shady investments, and under-the-table exchanges with politicians, business tycoons, and criminal organizations. But it's one particular letter, signed by a name none of them recognize, that catches Reed's attention. The letter hints at something bigger, a mysterious deal that Victor had been orchestrating with several parties. Was it this deal that led to his death? But even as these revelations unfold, something begins to gnaw at Inspector Reed. He realizes something is wrong. Victor, with all his charm and knowledge, had been playing everyone. These papers, this treasure trove of secrecy, hadn't just been a collector of art and rare artifacts. He had been the collector of people, exploiting everyone around him for personal gain. Each guest had been brought here for a reason, each one unknowingly serving a part in his grand scheme. Reed had thought he was solving a murder, but was he just another piece on Victor's chessboard? Suddenly, the weight of it all crashes down on him. The pieces don't just fit, they lock into place. This wasn't a series of random murders. This was Victor's last, brilliant move. Reed's investigation, his questions, his every insight had been a script all along, one that Victor Langley had written before his death. Could Reed have been meant to unravel the mystery from the very start? Was he being manipulated as well? The vault door slams shut behind them as the realization hits. They are not solving a murder. They are walking into a trap, one set by the very man they thought had died. Victor Langley was not just a victim, he was a master manipulator. And the true game is about to be revealed. At that moment, as the storm outside rages, a figure steps from the shadows, one none of them expected to see again. The mysterious stranger who had lingered at the edges of their group emerges into the dim light of the vault, revealing a face that none of them recognize. This stranger, who had never fully entered the investigation, had always been a cipher, a person whose intentions seemed impossible to read. But now, in this hidden chamber, their role becomes undeniable. Reed feels a chill crawl up his spine. Had this stranger always been part of Victor's plan? The stranger stands tall, calm, even in the face of the revelation. So, it all comes to this. The stranger says quietly, their voice smooth and measured. Victor did his best to keep the game hidden, but it's over now. You've all played your parts. You're just too late to stop what's already been set in motion. The group is stunned, unsure whether to trust this new voice or dismiss it as another game. Vivian's hands tremble as she tries to understand. This stranger is no longer a ghost in the background. They are a catalyst, the final piece of Victor's puzzle. But even as they stare into the stranger's eyes, the questions remain unanswered. How much did they know about the game? What part did they play in the twisted plot? In the midst of the chaos, Reed suddenly hears the faintest of whispers. A low hum, a sound that seems to come from somewhere deep within the manor. The vault itself seems to pulse, like a living entity, its secrets now coming to life. Suddenly, the light flickers, and for a brief moment, the shadows seem to take form. Then, just as quickly, the room is plunged back into darkness, the storm outside thundering once again, as the walls seem to close in. Reed knows the game is no longer about solving a murder. It's about survival. The walls of the manor are shifting, the truth bending and breaking, and time is running out. The killer has always been watching, and now it seems they are moving closer. No one is safe, not Eleanor, not Julian, not Vivian. In the flickering candlelight, the final puzzle piece falls into place. The truth is unimaginable, and the killer is one of them. But who? The final confrontation in the grand hall. The storm has raged on through the night, now reduced to a soft, incessant patter on the windows. But inside Harrowfield Manor, the air is thick with tension. The guests, the remaining few, are gathered in the grand hall, a vast, vaulted room filled with shadows and silence, the only light coming from a flickering chandelier that casts eerie shapes on the walls. Inspector Reed stands at the center of the room, his mind racing as he stares at the 5 people before him. Eleanor, Julian, Vivian, the stranger, and the dead man's secrets, they're all here. But none of them are innocent. He knows now, without a shadow of doubt, that Victor Langley wasn't just a victim. He was the orchestrator of this twisted game, his machinations pulling at every string, leading them all down a path of death and deception. And the real question now isn't just who killed Victor, but why. Reed's voice is calm, measured, as he addresses the group. The truth is clear now. The game you've all been part of was never just about a collection of art or wealth. It was about control. Victor Langley had you all play your parts for a reason, each one of you, a pawn in his final scheme. He pauses, letting his words sink in. Eleanor Graves shifts uneasily, her fingers curling into her palm. Julian Marks avoids his gaze, his usual charm now a brittle mask cracking under the pressure. Vivian Harcourt stands at the far end, her back rigid, but her eyes dart to the shadows, as if seeking refuge from a truth too terrifying to face. The pieces fall into place. Eleanor, the young novelist, had known Victor for years. Their past cloaked in mystery held the key to understanding her actions. She had been drawn into Victor's world of secrets long before the murder, using her sharp mind to cover up his tracks, to spin the story in his favor. Then Julian, the gambler with a charm as lethal as a knife, had debts that Victor could call in at any moment. Those debts weren't just financial. They were personal, a promise made years ago that Julian couldn't escape. And Vivian Harcourt, the widow with the tragic past, had her own secrets, ones that tied her to Victor in ways she never intended. A coded message, a note handed to her before Victor's death, was the final piece to understanding her guilt. She wasn't just a victim in this game. She was an active participant in the deception. But the one person Reed never expected to play the pivotal role was the stranger, whose presence had been a constant enigma throughout the investigation. This figure, never fully revealed, had been lurking on the edges, never quite fitting into the puzzle. Until now. As Reed closes in, the room becomes tense, the walls pressing inward as if the manor itself is holding its breath. The stranger finally steps forward, their face a mask of calm detachment. "You think you understand everything, don't you, Reed?" they say softly, their voice laced with amusement. "But you're wrong. Victor's game wasn't just about the deaths. It was always about control over every one of you. The moment Reed has been dreading has arrived. The killer is standing before him. The confessions, the lies, the secrets, all of it, is about to be laid bare." Julian, unable to maintain his composure any longer, breaks down, admitting his involvement in Victor's schemes. Eleanor follows suit, revealing how Victor had blackmailed her into assisting with his art deals, using her writing as a means of laundering money. Vivian, her hands trembling, admits her complicity in the murder show she had been forced into a corner by Victor's manipulations, her own dark past, now intertwined with his. But just as everything seems to fall into place, as the killer is about to be revealed, a chilling voice interrupts. A voice that comes from the shadows. A voice that shouldn't be there. One that no one had expected. "Did you really think it was over?" The words hang in the air like a spell. The room falls silent. Reed freezes. His mind races, his thoughts a blur of confusion. There's someone else in the room, someone who has been hidden, someone who knows far too much. The shadows in the far corner of the hall shift, and a figure emerges, their face obscured by the darkness. But the one thing Reed knows for certain is that this person wasn't supposed to be here. They are the final twist in a game that has already claimed too many lives. The killer is still among them. And now, the game has truly begun.